for having me here today. Can everybody hear me well enough? That's the right height. Second here. So I passed around some copies of the PowerPoint presentation, which I'm not doing, but going to be sort of following along on. If you weren't able to get a copy and you do want a copy, I believe Maya has it by email, so she could circulate that. Also afterwards, we have some pamphlets and bookmarks and some other information up here. If anybody's interested, please feel free to take whatever you'd like. So I'm here today basically to give a little bit of information about our office and what it is that we do. And I'm curious, quick show of hands, how many people have heard of the Taxpayers Ombudsman before this session? So not very many. So that is part of my work and what I'm doing, make sure we get the word out there of who we are and what we do. And of those people who have heard of our office, how many have actually used our services or had clients that have used our services? One. So, all right. So I've got work cut out for me, obviously. Going to go in a little bit into the institution of an ombudsman, the role of the Office of the Taxpayers Ombudsman, what we are, what we do, how we help resolve service-related complaints, some tips to assist people if you have clients who are using our services, some examples of complaints we've resolved, things we have done since I've taken office, and a little bit on priorities for the future. So what is an ombudsman? An ombudsman has its origins in the Swedish word meaning representative. It is a gender-neutral term. So it's a person who examines, reports on, and helps resolve complaints about a specific organization. In our case, that organization is the Canada Revenue Agency, or CRA, and we deal with service-related complaints involving the CRA. So we are impartial, we work independently from, and as I often say, we don't advocate for taxpayers, but at the same time we aren't a defender of the CRA. So we take an objective look at complaints we receive and issues that are brought to our attention. So what we do, as I said, we look into issues or complaints involving the service provided by the Canada Revenue Agency. So it's not necessarily, we don't look into if somebody applied for a credit and they didn't get the credit and they want to appeal that, that goes through appeals and objections. We would deal with if they got fulsome information, if it was timely, examples such as that. So we can't deal with legislation or actual policy administration, but we deal with the service behind it and the fairness of the procedures. There's four main ways that my office assists taxpayers. Firstly, we examine individual complaints. We conduct systemic examinations, so those would be examinations into issues that address a larger number of taxpayers or a certain segment of the population. We help taxpayers access CRA redress mechanisms to resolve their service-related matters. So I'll go into all of these in a little bit more detail. And we raise awareness about what we do. So I am a special advisor to the Minister of National Revenue, which means that I report directly to her. I don't report to the Canada Revenue Agency, and the Canada Revenue Agency is within the portfolio of the Minister of National Revenue. We operate at arm's length and independently, and any recommendations that we may have for improving service or changes that we see should be made, those are made directly to the Minister. So in everything that we do, we try to abide by four main guiding principles. So those are independence, so being independence from the CRA, impartiality, fairness, and confidentiality. So for example, on the confidentiality, we are also bound by the same confidentiality rules of the taxpayer information that the CRA is bound by. We don't provide information, taxpayer information, to the CRA without the taxpayer's consent, and likewise, they can't provide us with information about the taxpayer's file without the taxpayer's consent. So as I said, a couple of things that we don't do. We don't review matters that are before the courts. We can't review complaints that arose or about issues that arose prior to February 21st, 2007, and that's just in the creation of the office, that's the year before the office was created. We can't review issues relating to tax policy or program legislation unless it specifically relates to a service aspect, and we don't review issues that are not service related. However, I always say, if you're not sure if it's something we would cover or not, contact us anyway, and we will certainly do everything we can to assist you or your taxpayer, and if not, if we can't assist, we do try to direct in the right direction. So we don't simply say, no, it's not within our mandate, and hang up the phone. We will educate the person on what it is that we can look at and try to direct them to where they can get some assistance. So I've been using the term taxpayer. It's a broad term for what we use and for what we can cover. It includes individuals and businesses, so that may be small businesses, maybe huge multinational businesses. So any of the individuals or businesses that are liable to pay a tax in Canada, or anybody who's eligible to receive a benefit. So maybe a person who doesn't technically owe income taxes, but they are eligible to receive a benefit, they would fall within the definition of taxpayer for our purposes, and we would be able to deal with any service-related issues that they have. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights, I'm going to do a quick show of hands again. Has anybody heard of this, familiar with it? Okay, so a few more hands than knew of our office. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights does exist. It describes the treatment that taxpayers are entitled to when they're dealing with the CRA. It outlines 16 specific rights and also includes CRA's commitment to small business in there, in addition to those 16 rights. In there are 8 service rights that within our mandate were specifically directed to deal with those service rights within the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. So I'm just going to quickly list those, give you an idea of what it is that we look into. So the first of those 8 service rights is to be treated professionally, courteously, and fairly. Secondly, the right to complete accurate, clear, and timely information, and that's one we often hear a lot about. The right to lodge a service complaint and to be provided with an explanation of the CRA's findings. So just a clarification on that one, this Taxpayer Bill of Rights is the rights that taxpayers can expect with respect to CRA. So that right to lodge a service complaint relates to the CRA's service complaint program. Still have the right to lodge a service complaint with us, but this relates to CRA having to have that program available and providing reasons for its decisions through that program. Taxpayers have the right to have the cost of compliance taken into account when tax legislation is administered. They have the right to expect the CRA to be accountable, also to expect the CRA to publish service standards and report annually on those standards and how they measure up against those standards that have been set. And the last 2, taxpayers have the right to expect the CRA to warn taxpayers about questionable tax schemes in a timely manner. And lastly, they have the right to be represented by a person of their choice. So for an individual who has a complaint on a particular service-related issue with the Canada Revenue Agency, there's 3 main steps. We are to be an office of the last resort, and we always try to have things resolved at the lowest possible level. That generally means the lower possible level means things are easier to resolve at that point and quicker. Certainly if things have to go further on through the process, that can be done. First thing we recommend is that a taxpayer deal with the CRA agent or employee with whom they have had an issue, or if they've received a letter, often collections letters, if there is a agent's name and number there, to contact them and try to address the issue there. If the issue can't be resolved at that level, the next is to speak to their manager or supervisor. And if that doesn't resolve the issue, then as I mentioned, CRA has a service complaints program, so the taxpayer is expected to file their complaint with the service complaints program. So they have full access to all of the information about the taxpayer, all of the information about what may have gone on in their current matter, and they will take a fresh look at it and address the issue. If taxpayers still aren't satisfied, then they are expected, or they have the right to come to our office and have us look into the matter. As I said, if the complaint's not within our mandate, we will direct them as best we can in the right direction to help them resolve their matter. We can skip these 3 steps and take a complaint, even if they haven't gone through those steps or haven't gone through the service complaints process with the Canada Revenue Agency, if there are compelling circumstances. So in that situation, for example, if the complaint raises a systemic issue, or if they have undue hardship, financial or personal hardship arising out of the service-related issue, we may see that it's best for us to address the issue rather than send them back to the service complaints program. And I should mention that if somebody contacts us with a complaint and they haven't gone through the service complaints program, we will ask them to file that complaint with that program first, but we do follow up. After 30 to 35 days, we will follow up and check with the CRA to see if it's been finalized. If it has, we will follow up with the taxpayer to ensure whether they're satisfied with the result from that complaint process or whether they want to proceed further with having our office look into the issue. So as I mentioned, systemic examinations is another way in which we help to improve the service provided by Canada Revenue Agency. We will we take a number of methods to look into identifying systemic issues. One such method is doing what I'm doing here today, coming out and speaking to people, and I'm sure you will have lots of questions and examples after I'm done of potential service-related issues. So we use that as a good idea, a good way to find out from the grassroots, dealing with taxpayers, what sort of issues are out there and in the various regions I'm visiting. We do trends analysis as well for all phone calls or complaints that we receive in. We monthly look at those and keep track of where we're seeing certain trends in certain issues or complaints, and that can help guide us in whether we are doing a systemic examination in that matter. We also do environmental scanning such as media, seeing what's out there, what issues people are reporting to the media. At the Minister's request, we can also start a systemic examination. So if the Minister of National Revenue specifically asks us to look into an issue, then we can do that as well. In fact, we have to look into it if the Minister asks us to do it. So once we, the bit of the process for a systemic examination, once we've identified that there's an issue potentially, we do some preliminary research to make sure whether this is actually a systemic issue, whether it's something that's maybe just one person misinterpreting something and thinking it applies to a number of people. We want to make sure we have knowledge about the issue before we decide whether we're going to launch a full examination. So once we do that research and we decide, yes, this needs to be examined further, we will do an opening memorandum to the Minister advising her of the issue and that we will be doing a systemic examination. We will be publishing those memos on our website as well once we start new examinations to let the public know what it is that we're looking into. Once we complete our research then and complete the examination, we will look at information that we've received potentially from taxpayers or tax practitioners or other people who have contacted us about that issue. We will look at information from the CRA. We will use outside sources as applicable as well. And once we finish that research, we do a report. And we do that report directly to the Minister of National Revenue, and it will be published on our website then after 60 days after she's had it. That provides time for her to review the report, advise the CRA, and for the CRA to do an action plan as well. Those reports will either have recommendations or may not have recommendations. If they do have recommendations, it's because we found that there is a consistent or a persistent systemic issue, and we are making a recommendation for how to fix that issue or how to improve the service around that matter. The reason we may not have recommendations may be either we found that CRA was doing what it should be doing, there isn't actually a problem or improvement that should be made or changes that should be made. Or most commonly what we found is by us raising an issue and advising the CRA about it and gathering information from them about it, they immediately start to make changes in their processes or procedures or how they are dealing with that matter. And so sometimes by the time we get to writing the final report, CRA has made the changes that need to be made, and in our report we will reflect what those changes are. And we publish that as well to make sure that people are aware of those changes, because that can affect your everyday dealings with CRA and changes that may affect how you are dealing with your taxes. So as I mentioned as well, part of my responsibility is to raise awareness about our office. So it's important to inform and educate taxpayers about their rights, so the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, ensure that taxpayers and people who help serve them are aware of what we do, and to hear from taxpayers and the people who work with them about what service issues they may have that may be systemic in nature. So we try to target a number of audiences. It's really difficult to reach out to all 34-odd million people in the country that are affected, either benefit recipient or owing taxes. So we try to target people and use people such as yourself, but we are using you to help get the word out about what we do. So people who have larger networks and can spread the word about what we do. So tax professionals such as accountants and lawyers we target, community organizations, professional organizations such as yourselves, taxpayers individually or in groups, and some underserved audiences. So we've identified some audiences that we feel, or groups of people that we feel may have more difficulty in accessing CRA services or accessing our services as well. And those include people such as those in the North, Indigenous populations, newcomers to Canada, people who have difficulty or little access to internet or online services. So those are some groups that we've identified as wanting to make sure we reach out to and find ways to contact them to make them aware of our services and what we do. As well, reaching out to the CRA is important to me, to make sure that we build a relationship such that we can work collaboratively in making changes to service procedures and making changes that are going to improve service. And part of that has led to, as I said, when we get to finalizing a report, and they've already started making changes because we've been able to have those dialogues along the way. So it's important for me to make sure that CRA understands the role of our office, demystifies it a bit, and for me to understand what CRA employees are doing. So I've gone to a number of the tax centers and tax service offices to find out what the work is that they're doing on a daily basis, and that helps us be more effective in the type of recommendations that we can make. So for any of you who may have clients who you assist in dealing with tax matters, or anybody that you may represent or assist, a couple of tips and things to suggest. When it comes to authorizing a representative, even if a person has authorized a representative with the Canada Revenue Agency, we will require a separate authorization for a representative. And as I said, we don't have access to all of the CRA databases, so we don't know if they're authorized with the CRA or not. Furthermore, if a representative is authorized, it's for that complaint only, because we don't want to presuppose that the representative is authorized to deal with another issue, another complaint that the person may have down the road. So if there is a new complaint, we would ask for new authorization. We also want to make sure to what extent the taxpayer is authorizing the person to act on their behalf. So it may simply be that, you know what, if this person happens to call you looking for information, yes, you can talk to them, give them whatever information, same as if you're talking to me, the taxpayer. It may be that, look, I don't want to deal with it at all, I'm a small business owner, I want you to deal solely with this person, and I don't want to have to spend time dealing with this issue out of my day. In that case, we will still talk to the taxpayer if they call us, though. We're not going to say, sorry, you've got a representative authorized, we're not telling you anything. If a taxpayer ever called us on the file, we would still communicate with them and answer their questions. Getting ahead of myself here. A couple of tips to assisting any clients you may have or persons you're assisting. in resolving their service issues. The first is to manage their expectations. So first is to make sure they're aware of what it is that we can do for them. So we can only deal with their service-related issues. As I said, if they need an appeal or an objection, there's separate processes within the CRA for that. Also to manage their expectation with respect to the amount of time it can take. Given that we don't have direct access to CRA's databases, we have to request that information from the CRA. So if a taxpayer's on the phone with us and saying, yeah, often they'll say, you guys, because they think we're the CRA too, which we're not. You guys know this, you've got that, I've talked to somebody about this before. We don't have that in front of us. So to make sure that the person you're assisting or even yourselves is aware that there is that limitation. We can get the information from the taxpayer, but then we will have to request the further information from the CRA. The second tip is to use the CRA Service Complaints Program first, unless there's some compelling circumstances, as I addressed earlier. So if they're going to contact us and we're going to say, well, you have to go through the Service Complaints Program first, rather than causing them that extra frustration and delay of contacting us first, have them do that first and then come to us if they're still not satisfied. And the third tip is to submit detailed information. So the more information we have, the more details we have, the more pointed and direct we can be in the questions that we're asking when we do request information from the CRA. So the more details we have too on who they may have spoken to, when they spoke to them, timelines are very important because there are service standards and specific timelines for a lot of things. So the more information we get on that, the better we can assist your clients or the person you're assisting, and oftentimes it can help cut down on the time it takes for us to sort a matter out. So a couple of examples on some complaints we've received. Just to give you an idea, we've run the full gamut. There's a whole bunch of different types, but some examples. Occasionally we do get individual complaints where it turns out that the CRA is not at fault. Such a situation is, we had an example of a gentleman who contacted us with a complaint about the CRA. It was not a unique complaint. We very often hear his complaint, which is, I had a collections matter and suddenly CRA froze my bank account without telling me, and I had no notice. So that is something we do hear about frequently. We usually find there has been notice. We are finding sometimes some miscommunication on what the taxpayer understands as notice or what they understand as the process. In this case, he reported that he'd been dealing with a collections officer. They had a very adversarial relationship. There have been a number of arguments. He said he wasn't being treated professionally or fairly. He reported that he had filed an objection on the matter and hadn't ever received a response to it or a determination of it. And he had provided a copy of his objection to the collections officer, but still didn't know where that stood. He said he provided all of the financial information that CRA had requested, but still, without notice, bank accounts frozen. So we dealt with this on a urgent basis because he was saying, look, he's got no access to money, he's in severe financial straits. We contacted the CRA and asked them to look into it, and they came back to us and gave us some information, which was different from what we were hearing from the taxpayer, which was that he had received actually a response to the objection over a year prior. He hadn't provided all of the financial information that they needed in order to be able to set up the payments and whatnot. They had been trying to set up payments for quite some time and had made a number of attempts to contact him and deal with it before they actually went to his bank. So we asked if they could contact the taxpayer and put all of that information together for him because the objection had been over a year before, whether he understood, the process, what information he had gotten. And so they contacted the taxpayer, gave him all that information together, and we later found out that within 4 days, the CRA had received the full amount owing from the taxpayer. So we're not quite sure exactly why that was, whether it was a taxpayer trying to take, the very last step to get around having to pay it, or it was simply having to open those communication doors and helping them get that information that they needed to understand what was going on. So a second example of some of the individual complaints we deal with is reassessment of GST. So there was, as a result of an income tax audit. So a gentleman had filed his personal income taxes and was audited for a particular year. Following the audit, he received a notice of reassessment and informed that as a result of the audit, his GST and HST return for his business was also going to be changed for the same period. So he filed an objection for the income tax reassessment and was under the impression that that would also serve for the GST, HST assessment, since the income tax had prompted the GST, HST. So he was later informed that that wasn't the case, and he had to file separate objection for the GST, HST matter and for his individual income tax. He indicated that he hadn't been told that before, he had no knowledge of that, and furthermore, he was told that he was outside of the 90-day period to file an objection on the GST and HST matter. So he submitted a complaint to us. We requested information from the CRA to inquire about his case. And the CRA reviewed it, and in the end, they allowed the taxpayer's objection to stand for both the individual and for the GST, HST, and they did end up changing his GST assessment as well. Additionally, the CRA has advised us that they are currently reviewing the procedures on that to look into whether they will allow a notice of objection under the Income Tax Act to also be considered a notice of objection under the Excise Tax Act. So although that is policy and not something that's directly within our mandate, us shining a light on an issue and looking at a particular matter has led the CRA to look into that policy issue. So I'm going to give a little bit of information on what I've done in my first year as Taxpayers Ombudsman, some information on some of our statistics for the 2015-2016 fiscal year. To give you an idea, our intake officers received over 2,500 telephone calls, which allowed us to tell taxpayers what to do, help direct them to where they need to go, and deal with their individual complaints. We opened over 1,400 new individual complaint files, and those, over 1,300 of them were closed before the end of the fiscal year. Over 200 were full individual examinations that we completed. Over 420 we sent to CRA service complaints and had their issue addressed there. And over 220 were resolved by sending an urgent request for action, so where there is that compelling circumstance to deal with the matter on an expedited basis. So when I started, there were 12 systemic examinations that were open and in progress. And during my first year, we completed or closed 10 of those. And those, for I believe 7 of them, the closing memorandums are posted on our website. So that leaves us with 2 ongoing systemic examinations right now, as well as some other issues that we're doing preliminary research into. But the 2 open examinations that we have, we're anticipating having those finalized and reports done before the end of March of 2017, so before the end of this fiscal. And the first is in delays in the taxpayer relief program. So we were looking into we got a lot of complaints on just how long it was taking to get any satisfaction or results or anything in the taxpayer relief program. So we've been doing an examination into, first of all, timeliness and the consistency of how long it's taking across the country, but also the accuracy of the CRA's timelines that they're providing to taxpayers, saying, it's going to take approximately this long. So there have been some actions taken, some changes CRA has made already since we've started this examination. First is they are doing better at communicating the estimated timelines and being more accurate in how long it's going to take. And they have centralized the TRP, or taxpayer relief requests. So they did have a better processing time and more consistency, but there's been more uptake in the program too. So they have higher volume, so that has minimized some of the effects of that improvement that we've seen. But that's an examination that we will be completing in the near future. The second one that we are coming near the end of completing is sufficiency of information in the CPP and EI rulings decision letters. And so CRA used to provide the full rulings report, the full decision when they made a determination and sent that to the taxpayer. Then they changed the process somewhat and added a number of elements that had to be looked at in making such a determination. And the decision was made to simply provide the decision, the CPP or EI decision and determination in the letter and a reference to the appropriate legislation without providing the full rulings report and the full decisions. So we were receiving a number of complaints about that, particularly people, how do I know if I need to appeal if I don't know the basis upon which the decision was made? So we've been looking into that, and there is, CRA has made one change since we started that, which is in their letters, they used to refer to, please go to the general CRA homepage for further information on this. The website they're referring to is more specific and has more targeted information, so that in those letters now refer to the have you received a CPP EI ruling webpage. So that is a bit of improvement, but our examination is still ongoing and we will be finalizing that soon. Some direction for the future. As I had indicated, we're trying to be more proactive in reaching out and getting information on what the systemic issues are that people are seeing before waiting to have individual complaints coming in and we can see a trend that, oh yes, this is a systemic issue. We want to continue our communication and outreach to inform people of what we do, to try to improve the service from CRA. We also are keeping our eye on a couple of things. So the CRA in their budget 2016 announced some funding for various areas, and we know there's certain things that the CRA is doing. One is improving telephone access. So that is a huge call driver for us. We receive a lot of calls from people saying they're just having difficulty accessing the CRA. And so money has been allocated to that. And we are following up, keeping our eye on where that's going and what's being done with that and how that's improving service to taxpayers. Easy to understand correspondence. The biggest thing you may have all noticed is the new notices of assessment. So the CRA is rolling out easier to understand correspondence across all areas. Not every document is being changed all at once, but that is something that we are keeping an eye on to make sure that the new correspondence is easier to understand, is at a level that most Canadians can read, preferably that all Canadians can understand. And so we are keeping an eye on that as well. There are also a few other things such as connected to the CRA My Business account. They are having My Audit account can be connected to that. So it's an easier mechanism for taxpayers to be able to keep track of their audit. Also, there's My Benefits, which is linked to the My account as well. So that's a way for benefit recipients to keep track of their benefits. So some things that we're keeping an eye on. We also have various issues that we are doing preliminary research on into as well to determine whether we want to do systemic examinations into those matters. So that's the end of what I have to say. At the end of the decks and also on some of the paperwork and pamphlets up here, there is information on how to contact us and how to keep in touch with us. There is also a systemic examination information form. So if you have information that you feel is of a systemic nature, an issue that you have, there's a form here you can certainly fill out and send back to us. Also, if you go on our website, there is a feedback email address that you can provide us with systemic information. We ask that you don't provide specific taxpayer information via that email, but we do ask that you provide us with your contact information so that if we do have further questions on it, we can get back to you to get more information. So I don't know what time it is. I hope we still have time for lots of time for questions. So I'm at your disposal here for any questions that anybody may have. Let's start over here. And
And I'll pass that over. I was actually going to make a joke that I want to see how many questions actually relate to the T2222 form, and it looks like our first one is right there. So I'll pass that over to Rob.
Well, I can tell you we haven't actually done a systemic examination on it at this point, but it is something we've been hearing a great deal about in the last couple of months. We actually just came from Iqaluit yesterday as well, and that was something I've heard a great deal about. We had received some information from George Broussard and Andy Wong as well on that specific difficulties with the wording of it and the trying to figure out what the three criteria, especially one of them is very difficult, and what falls into that. So also in Iqaluit we had, I know people mentioned a couple of other little different aspects of it that are problematic. So it's definitely something that's on our radar. Our systemic team is aware of it, and we haven't done an examination yet, but we are aware that it is an issue. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I got up to the Canada Revenue Agency doesn't understand, and I'm losing you every once in a while. Sorry.
I understand what we said. I made a mistake and used the wrong word. The person authorized the information. It was the information they were asking for, but because they couldn't identify what was sent to them by an authorized person, they ignored the alert information. And I had no idea that the information was being ignored. And months went by until I finally got a complaint from the taxpayer and found out that they had ignored my letter containing the information. And then I was able to contact them to get it straightened out. Now, my view is that they will ignore information that is sent to them because they think it may not be from one person. Instead of sending a polite response that the information isn't being dealt with because the authorized person has submitted.
Thanks.
I really have a hard time understanding, but when they get the information that they ask for, why do they just
I understand the frustration on that. Communication is really kind of the prevailing issue that we see running through almost all of the systemic issues that we see. And I'm sorry, I'm going to draw a spotlight to Lorna, who's director in our office here, but as you can see, she is furiously taking notes. So I know she's noted down your issue. And I do invite anyone that has, at any time, if you've got a specific taxpayer where an issue has happened and they want to file a complaint, certainly please do that, and also to advise us of any systemic issues that you find. That may certainly affect more than just that one taxpayer. So, thank you.
Question from Mr. Brock over here first.
Great, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to share a little bit more about what you do in your office with us today. One of the key measures of an office such as yours is independence. One of the ways that independence is generally measured is around budgeting. Right, so an office such as yours can be buttressed by having adequate resources to do what you need to do, and can be restrained by having insufficient resources. So I'm wondering if you could spend a little bit of time with us on taking us through what is the budgeting process for your office, and that relationship between you and perhaps the deputy head, you and the minister, and obviously ultimately the minister's relationship with her.
So our budget is actually within the parameters of the Minister of National Revenue. It's within sort of the CRA's budget, but it gets pulled out immediately off the top. And so as far as the sufficiency of the budget, so far, I've only been in here a year and a bit, so far it's been sufficient for our needs. And my understanding is my predecessor, they were always definitely within their budget, and it was sufficient for what needed to be done. The use of the budget, although it may originally come from funds allocated to the CRA and National Revenue, the use of the budget is within my discretion. So I can use it to do the things that we need to do to make sure that we are serving taxpayers and addressing service matters. We also have to, though, abide by the financial and fiscal policies of the CRA, as well as the human resource policies of the CRA. So that is actually a good thing. They are very strict. That is one of the things I've really had to bone up on. Coming from private practice and not working in government, there is a lot of de rigueur over the financial allocation or use of funds, and we do have a lot of reporting that we do. In our annual report, I am mandated, I have to provide an annual report yearly on what we've done. We also include in there our budget and the major line items and where the money has gone to. Does that address most of what you're asking, or is there something specific?
Most of, I want to be clear that I wasn't going to ask you whether or not it was sufficient.
Okay.
And just more so what was the process, because you can see how potentially that can be restrained by a deputy head, that's the president of the CRA, doesn't really like some of the questions you're asking, or even a minister who's finding herself, in this case, with the difficult role of parliament, because of the questions that have been asked for as a result of your work.
So I don't have that oversight from the CRA at all. Ultimately, I am accountable to the minister, but so far I haven't had issues with that.
And we have another question over here.
And have you used the My Business account and uploaded documents there? Yeah. Has your experience been better though with the My Business? Okay, good. Good. So I don't know if other people have heard of that, but as far as trying to get acknowledgement of receipt of documents, she's saying the My Business account certainly has assisted with that, with being able to upload documents via that account, and also the online complaint system to find out if documents have been received.
Are there any other questions from the floor?
Here. Hey. Sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing. I'm missing.
Through an accounting firm.
Oh, okay. So, yes, we get complaints from all walks of life. So we've gotten a lot of complaints from individual taxpayers. We do get complaints. If they are individual complaints, we have to receive the complaint from the taxpayer or their authorized representative, but we do get individual complaints from their representatives, such as accounting firms. And we do get information from accountants on systemic issues that they've seen. So we do receive information there. And so it's important to me to continue to build on that and to continue to receive more information, both from individuals and from accountants and firms who are dealing with larger numbers of taxpayers. that answer your question? Okay. Anything else?
I was wondering if your office is a possible alternative to tax.
No. So the question is if my office is an alternative to tax court. And no, any matters that would be dealt with in tax court likely would not be within our mandate. So we're mandated only to deal with the service-related matters from the CRA. So if it's actually appealing a determination, that would go through tax court. However, there are certain elements that may arise out of that same interaction that would be within our mandate to deal with. So, for example, how that was dealt with, how the person was treated, the timeliness of it. Was there consideration given to the cost of compliance? For example, repeatedly sending the same documents, things such as that may fall within our office's mandate. But generally, if it's something that's going to go to the tax court, no, we're not an alternative for that.
I have a question. I'm wondering, when the office was created, had there been calls for an ombudsman, or was the decision to have an ombudsman something that sort of was internally decided upon? How did the office actually come to?
I'm going to possibly defer to Lorna. I'm going to speak a bit, and then she may fill in the gaps or correct me. Lorna actually has been with the office since before it was created. So it was part of the government's priorities at the time to create more accountability and more transparency. So I know there were several federal ombudsman type positions or ombudsman positions that were created around the same time. So I suspect it perhaps may have been public calls for. Yeah. You want to just come up, maybe?
So that all was there, but there had been calls previously for some sort of
Oversight.
of the kind of regulation. And there have been various considerations, not the taxpayers of the right to hold the years, which is the right to taxpayers charter, and we worked with that. So there has been going on, but it wasn't until 2007 that taxpayers of the right to form, CRAs were formed, and then launched.
Do you deal with federal tax workers or territorial? For example, if I have an issue that is territorial,
we don't deal with specifically territorial or provincial revenue issues. It's just the Canada Revenue Agency, so it's just federal tax issues. I know sometimes there's some interplay there, so it's kind of hard to tease out one from the other, but we would only deal with the federal aspect. I don't know if Northwest Territories has a territorial ombudsman. I don't believe so. A lot of provinces do have their own provincial ombudsman. I know Protecteur de Citoyen on Quebec, they deal a lot with the Revenue Quebec end of things. So there are often territorial and provincial positions that are similar or are a certain element of oversight, but that's not what we deal with. It's not within our mandate. Anything else? I'll get a flurry of emails later.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Okay, so I'd like to thank Ms. Profit for coming today, and I'll do an introduction even though I got up and saw most of the faces that I recognize. I'm Dennis Marchiori. I'm the chair for IPAC NWT this year. And so I would like to thank Ms. Profit for the presentation today. I'd also like to thank the NWT CJA Association for partnering with IPAC NWT on today's event. And before you go, we have a slight gift for you here. Just pass out the box. Magic. It just appears.
Thanks.
And we do have a little bit more time, so if you do want to ask some other questions not in front of the group, you can come on up and talk to Ms. Profit. Again, thank you for your time today.